So weight discrimination is definitely a problem here in America, with more than 40% of adults in the U.S. having experienced weight-related stigma. So here's a question for you. Should you, or should overweight people, be a protected class? So this is already the case in New York and Michigan, and there is new legislation right here in Colorado that would make it illegal to discriminate against people based on weight. Other states are also considering similar laws. So what do you think? Do you think should overweight people be a protected class? We want to hear from you. Go to dblvote.com to weigh in. Okay, so Tori, please, I know that you have a number of other additional facts for us.
Yeah, so 42% of U.S. adults report experiencing some weight stigma. Just so you know, that's about like 1 in 4, I think. I had that at some point. But also, listen, women with obesity earn 6% less than thinner women. Men with obesity earn 3% less than thinner men for identical work. They also feel like they've been wrongfully terminated in their jobs and have very strong negative stereotypes. All of that is true. I don't disagree, but I do disagree they should be in a protected class.
Why do you disagree?
I think a protected class is something that you're Al brought about this earlier, inherently born with, or at least adapted into. Obesity is something that, of course, shouldn't be discriminated against. But in my mind, that should be up to the companies to regulate. That shouldn't be up to the government to protect. In my mind, it's if you're a person of color, if you're queer, gay, or straight, or fluid, excuse me, on that line, not straight, but fluid on that line, certain religions that you're born into, those to me are more needing protection than obesity, which can fluctuate. Let's be honest, you can go up, you can go down, and again, if it is a real disease you're dealing with, there's disability acts that you can prove for hiring. I don't see the need for this. I think it's government overreach, in my opinion.
Erica?
I have a real hard time going against the idea that obesity should be protected, because we are also having conversations about how obesity is a disease, that there's
and genetic.
Right, exactly. So that's tough for me, because I feel like when you're talking about obesity, you're also talking about other minority groups in terms of how aesthetics plays into the discrimination. Now, I know that people will say that I'm wrong on this, and I'm not talking about biology. I'm talking about the way, like, our own social rules, norms, and mores that are really contributing to said discrimination. In that case, a lot of times race is aesthetic. Gender has become aesthetic. Obesity is definitely aesthetic. You're not talking about someone's BMI or what their actual health chart looks like. So really, should anyone be in a class or be able to be discriminated upon based on how they look is the question that I feel like we're posing, and my answer is no.
Okay. It's interesting, because Erica, you brought up something I hadn't thought about. You're really kind of talking about two almost totally different things. One, the fact that we're looking at weight as a disease, and we're also looking at it as something that is aesthetic. You could, God forbid, have cancer but not present to the world. So there is a difference. But it does also open up a different lane then. Because if we're talking about what we consider a disease, is alcoholism considered a disease? I think so. So are they protected? Okay, then should your company be forced to hire somebody that has several DUIs, and it's been proven that they are an alcoholic and that this is a medical condition? So does your private company, are they now on the hook to have to accept this person's disease because of the Disabilities Act?
You're afraid it's a slippery slope.
I'm not saying it's a slippery slope. I'm just saying we need to have a clear definition of what protection means and a clear definition of who is protected and under what circumstances.
And it should be, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it should be smallest amount possible. That's why the protection is so dear. They are the most vulnerable. It shouldn't be opening up, in my opinion, to many different sort of traits. It really should be kept protected. That's the whole point of it.
Let me ask you this really quickly, Tori, before we have to run. Should United Airlines, should they be forced to hire Shaquille O'Neal to be a flight attendant?
Right, and that's a good point.
I worked with him in person. He's the biggest human being I've ever seen in my life.
And there's a problem.
But if in his heart that's what he's always wanted to do, what should they as a private company do?
Well, if there is a height and weight which is being offered, they would have to allow Shaquille O'Neal to be on there, or someone who was very short, for instance, and couldn't reach up, they would have to at that point. But then you run into emergency situations, and that's my issue with this, is at some point it should be up to the companies to make the decision and do better morally, but it should be up to them to make the discernment.
And if there's something egregious that goes on within said company,
You could certainly sue.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yes, and
All
then
right.
you start getting into companies that don't want to make certain cakes for certain people. So it's
Got
a
it.
super interesting
And it's a
Religion,
great
which is
conversation.
protected.
Let's take a look at what our
Good point.
viewers believe. 72%. That's a big span. Say no. You do not think that overweight people should be a protected class. 28% of you say yes.